Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. When we started out the article writing course, it quickly got the reputation as being the toughest writing course in the world. This rather fearsome reputation was due to a slight misunderstanding that was left unfixed. As part of the instructions, I'd asked the participants to write an article, and since they were the early days and we were still finding our feet, I didn't clearly explain myself. However, my intention was that they write one article a week. One of the participants was Paul Wolf, and he assumed that he was to write one article a day, and so he wrote one article on the first day, which the other members of his small group also did, and then on day 2 he wrote another article, and again the group followed him. Before I could recover from this turn of events, the group was writing 6 articles a week, barring Sunday, which was the day off. When you consider that the course lasted well over 3 months at that time, they were writing a mind-boggling 20 to 25 articles a month, which amounted to well over 70 articles over the duration of the course. Yet when you look back at the article writing course today, no one writes 70 articles. Instead, the number of articles written is closer to 20 or fewer, which doesn't seem to make much sense, does it? Contrarian behavior doesn't always make sense, and if you're listening to this, you're probably listening to the 3rd part of this series on contrarian behavior. And you're not being very contrarian at all because you're following the series, but nonetheless, there is part 1 and part 2, and you can listen to them. In part 3, we're going to look at how to give contrarian advice to clients. All business is going to fall into 3 categories. You might be a consultant giving advice, or you might be in training, or finally you'd be creating products, either physical products or other types of products. And the way the world works is to always follow each other, do what the other person is doing, do what the competition is doing. It might be easier for you to give advice where clients will just play along because there is no wall of defense, there is no rock wall, there are no contrarian ideas showing up. So there is no instant resistance. Which is to say that if you were doing the current article writing course, you would buy into writing more articles more frequently than fewer articles. How could fewer articles end up with you becoming a better article writer? At some point, you'll have a method or system, a product, some advice that's totally contrarian in nature, or at least partially contrarian in nature, and you're thinking, well, this is not going to work so well with the clients. So how do you present these concepts to clients? You would think that clients would need a lot of proof and research, which is partially the reason why we keep these contrarian ideas to ourselves. Plus, we're afraid of being seen as some sort of crackpots. Yet clients recognize the validity of an idea even without proof as soon as you can explain yourself. So, if we go back to the concept of article writing and we say, okay, the way that we did the article writing course was to have one article a day. It sounds really romantic until you realize that the dropout rate is horrendous. It might take an hour or 2 to write an article a day. And then if you skip 1 day, you're falling behind. 2 days, and you feel like a failure. And even for those who keep to writing 1 article a day, it's a daily dread for months on end until they finally get a good handle on the craft. As soon as I've described this picture to you, suddenly it seems much better, so much superior to not write an article a day, to not have 70 articles at the end of 3 months and you're completely exhausted, you're burnt out, you don't want to see an article again. Suddenly, with a little bit of explanation, a little bit of the method that you're using, the client's mind has changed all by themselves. You don't have to do anything. You just have to explain the reasoning why you're doing something and what are the ramifications or the consequences of not following that something, which is why you're going down a contrarian path. I didn't give you any proof. I didn't give you any statistics. I just gave you a concept. And that's what you have to do with your clients as well. You just have to give them a concept why your slightly unusual method, maybe not contrarian, but slightly unusual method, is going to help them better than whatever has been done before. Easily the first and most important method to explain something to a client is to just give them this scenario of how things go wrong and why they go wrong. And automatically the client picks up and then they move in your direction, which means that there is no resistance, or at least very minor resistance, and you can both move ahead. And this takes us to the second part, which is how to get those contrarian ideas across when there's so much resistance from the client. One of the very odd ideas that you get on any of the courses that we conduct, whether it's the headline course, the article writing course, copywriting course, is this concept of the timer. It doesn't make any sense. You're supposed to write an article, or you're supposed to write copy, or you're supposed to write a headline or a bunch of headlines. Why would you do it in a specific amount of time? What if you don't finish within that time? Are you supposed to just leave all your work unfinished and just do unfinished assignment after unfinished assignment? You see what's happening here? It's a concept. A concept has existed and it's very hard to explain to a client, hey, this is my idea. It's contrarian in nature. You should listen to me. They're not going to listen to you. Here's where you have to bring in an analogy. Most of us drive cars. We either drive a petrol car, a diesel, or an electric. Yet we know one thing for sure, we can't run out of energy. You can see the analogy shaping up, can't you? A client is going to always say, well, I want to finish this journey. I want to spend more time writing an article. But that's kind of like driving a car and going, we haven't reached our destination. We're running out of fuel. We're running out of energy. And we still should keep going. Well, you know what happens next. You don't have to explain it that much. Clients get the point. They understand the analogy. They know that it's just not a matter of stopping the car, but seriously getting stuck, not being able to find another gas station, or if you have an electric car, it's even worse. There's no petrol tank you can fill and refill the car. Which is to say that the analogy often does a far superior job than just explaining it. It's one level to explain it. It's a whole different level to put in an analogy. Now you might be thinking, wait a second, for every analogy there is a counter analogy. For every this there is a that. And yes, there is, but the client at that point in time just wants to be reassured that they're not going down the wrong path. In the courses, there is this resistance to unfinished work. There is this resistance to the timer. There is this massive amount of frustration at some level because they want to do great work. But you don't do great work when you start out doing anything. If you start taking pictures for the first time, you never take great pictures. You take pictures down the line. And it's much better to take a few really grotty pictures, get them looked at by whoever's teaching you, fixing those. And so you're spending more time fixing the grotty picture so that you get better pictures down the line. And this is where the combination of the analogy and the explanation work together. Almost any difficult situation, almost any contrarian idea can be explained with an analogy. So if you're trying to get something across to the client and you think, well, they're not going to buy in, start with the analogy, follow it with the explanation, and now you've got like a double fortification, and it's very cool. Which takes us to the third part, and these are testimonials. Often we just think of testimonials as something good that the client is saying about us. But testimonials can also create this environment that enables the clients that follow to say, yeah, I agree with that. That's because it's third-party proof. It's not you saying it, it's somebody else saying it. So if we take these examples of the timer, and maybe you get the client to say, hey, what was your experience with the timer when you started out this course? And they go, oh, I hated it. It was terrible, blah, blah, blah. And then they go, but here's what I found. And it wasn't just the timer. It was also this concept where I got into the course thinking I'm going to write an article a day. I'm going to put it on my blog. I'm going to be so famous. I'm going to get all these articles out there. And then I realized that I was learning to write. I was not writing the article. I was learning the structure of how to write. Now, here's what's happened. It's not an analogy. It's not really an explanation from you, but it's a third-party testimonial or an experience. You don't want to call it a testimonial. That's fine. We call it an experience. And you've just asked the client, what was your experience with the timer before? What was your experience after? What was your experience with blah, blah before? And what was it after? And when they put that together, or when they give it to you and you put it together, what we have is a client experience. When they read somebody else's words, when they listen to somebody else's video or audio, now you're breaking down that resistance and you're able to not push the contrarian idea across. You're not doing any pushing, but it's easing it in very simply, very gently. And with that, we come to the end of this podcast. Now, what did we learn on this episode? We learned that often we're trying to get across these ideas to clients, and they're important for the client. They're important for speed, for efficiency, for quality. Who knows why your contrarian idea is better? But the problem is that a client is not going to accept it for what it is, which is why we have to use one of the three methods. The first is the explanation. And you can explain a concept, and it's the weakest of the three, but you can explain a concept. The second is the analogy. Now, the analogy is something that they've experienced before, so they're not going to argue with it. Yes, there's a counter analogy, but believe me, no one thinks about it at that point in time. Usually they're thinking of the analogy, it fits in with your idea, they go, yeah, that makes sense. And finally, and this is the most crucial of all, this is the most powerful of all, and this is the area I would work with, is to get a client to give you a before and after. I hated the timer, I love the timer. I don't exactly love the timer, but I know the value of the timer. I hated the groups because I had all these groups before and they all went blah, blah, blah. And now I love groups. I understand the power of groups. All of these ideas, a lot of them that we put into courses and workshops are totally contrarian. You're working with groups, you're working with timers, you're not finishing the articles, there are unfinished stuff. All of this stuff is like, oh wow, this is so confrontational. And it's not. That's how we get results, and that's how you should get results, by doing things in a more efficient, more fun way. And now you know how. So what's the one thing you can do today? If you have clients, and if there are things that you want to fix, you want to improve, then do the before and after. That's the first thing you can do today. But if you don't have clients and you still want to introduce something that's different, probably contrarian in nature, then the second thing would be to just get an analogy. And then you can test that analogy. You can, say, go into 5000 BC or any group or forum that you're part of, and you can test it and see how it works there, because someone will pitch in and tell you, oh, that's not so great, or that is really cool. So test that analogy. So one of the two things that you can do, I know I said one thing, but maybe you don't have clients, you're just starting out, in which case, work with the analogy. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. Let's find out what's happening in psychotactics land. September 26th, that's when uniqueness is rolling along. And as you know, uniqueness is not just about the uniqueness for a business. It's the uniqueness for every product. Every service needs to have a uniqueness. This is a lot of work, because you think about a phone, you think about anything that you buy on a recurring basis, and you'll notice that when you buy the next phone, you need to know, why is it different from the previous phone, or the next television, and why is it different from the previous one, even though it's from the same company. And that's like your company. Your company has or will have many products and services, and you need to know how to go about creating uniqueness or a factor of uniqueness for every one of them. Whether the company has a uniqueness or not is not entirely critical, but definitely every product and service is what the person who's buying it looks at on a kind of micro level. They're looking at, okay, this is the TV I'm buying. Why is it unique compared with the other one? There's also the article writing course that's coming up on the 10th of October. This is the home study version. So you download it and you start working on it at home at your own pace. Though it is a digital product, there are only 25 copies that we're offering this time. So if you get into psychotactics.com/awgoodies, that's where you'll be able to see how the article writing course is going to help you. As for the uniqueness, you have to go to psychotactics.com/ugoodies, and that's going to give you a bunch of goodies, as you would expect. Now, it's critical to be on both of those waiting lists if you want both of the products, or one of the waiting lists if you want one of the products. And even if you don't want them, it's still goodies, so you might as well go there. The waiting list is very crucial, otherwise you don't get a notification and you miss out. And then, I don't know, you have to wait for next year or something like that. If, on the other hand, you just want to look at the tiny products, you can go to psychotactics.com/tiny, Tiny, and have a look at the products, and I'm sure you'll find something that you can tweak, tiny little changes, tiny little tweaks. And that's pretty much it from me at Psychotactics Land. I'll say bye for now. Bye-bye. Still listening? One of the funny contrarian things that I did when I was starting out was I had to do this graphic design job. I was doing a lot of graphic design when I first started out. And this client came to me and there were like 20 pages of this brochure. And suddenly they made it 5 pages. And they said, oh, we still want the same content. We still want all the same stuff that was in 20 pages. Now imagine if it's in a 20-page brochure, it's going to be about 11 points so that you can read it. And how are you going to fit all of that into 5 pages? And he insisted, you have to have it in. So I did. I put it into 4-point and I took it to him. And it wasn't so contrarian. He was annoyed, but sometimes you have to make your point. Well, that's not me telling you to do something crazy like that, but it's a bit contrarian in a weird way. Anyway, it was nice doing this series, and I hope you enjoy all 3 of them, whether it's in a 3-to-1 sequence or 1-to-3 sequence, whatever you choose. I'll say bye for now, and I'll see you in 5000 BC. Bye-bye.